Today we're going to be installing a brush guard on this 2002 Volkswagen Golf. Now everything you're about to see will also apply to any VW Mk4 Golf or Jetta. Now it might come as a shock to you, but there are currently no factory or aftermarket brush guards available on the market for these cars. I know, isn't that crazy? But with a little bit of trimming, modding, fab work, we can make almost any brush guard out there fit on this car, and that's what I'm going to be showing you today. Now unfortunately, when I initially started this project, I didn't think to actually film and document this process. So instead, I'll be deconstructing the front end of this car for you, showing you everything I can to best explain what needs to be done to make this happen. Now before we start on the car, let's talk about the brush guard itself. The guard I got is made to fit a WJ Grand Cherokee, or basically a 99 to 2004 model year for you non-Jeep guys. I managed to pick mine up on Facebook Marketplace for about 60 bucks. Now obviously a full-size Jeep is a lot bigger than a little Volkswagen Golf, and thus this brush guard fit on the car like a fat man's coat on a small kid. It needed a little bit of trimming to make it fit right. Now the first thing I did was cut off this upper hoop thing. Ain't nobody want that, so just get that thing out of here. Next, I did some careful measuring between the brush guard and the car, cut about 5 inches out of the center, and then welded them back together. Lastly, I trimmed off these very bottom brackets that are supposed to bolt up to the Jeep. We don't need them, and they end up just getting in the way. The end result of all that hacking looks something like this, which in my opinion looks pretty damn good on this car. I mean, it almost looks like it was made for this car. I mean, it kind of is. I'd made it for this car, but you know what I mean. With the brush guard modified to fit, it's time to move on to the car. Now you see those two brackets sticking out of the bumper? Yep, that's what we gotta make to attach the brush guard to the car. These things are made out of 1/4-inch steel plates, but to install them, we're gonna have to disassemble the front end down to the core support. Start by removing the grille, then the plastic bumper shell. Don't forget to remove the side marker lights, or you'll end up ripping the wires out of the socket like I accidentally did. Now normally you would see a big white chunk of styrofoam covering the steel bumper. We're not going to need that anymore, so pull it off and chuck it in the trash. With the styrofoam gone, you can now get an idea of what we're doing here. Those steel plates are welded not just onto, but into the steel bumper, which is then bolted directly into the subframe. Now let's take the steel bumper off and I'll explain things a bit further. The 1/4-inch steel plates that I used are 3.5 by 12 inches, and that 3.5 inches ended up being a perfect fit for the front face of this bumper. Now the cool thing about this bumper is that it has 2 layers. It has this front face that I can attach these plates to, sure, but turn it over and you'll see that there's another layer of reinforcement on the inside, and as you can see, I took full advantage of that. Now before we start cutting holes, we obviously need to know where to cut these holes. Figure out approximately where your plates are going to be bolting up to your brush guard. Ideally, you want your plates to be on the inside of your brush guard frame, as to better conceal it. So take your measurements from the inner frame to inner frame, not the outer frame to outer frame. Take the measurement you got and divide that in half. Then subtract a 1/4-inch to compensate for the 1/4-inch plate. So for instance, I measured 24.5 inches. Divided in half is 12.25. Minus 1/4 is an even 12 inches. Find the center point on your bumper, which is where the hood latch bolts to. From that center line, measure out to the left and to the right, however many inches you got after all that math. So for me, that would be 12 inches. That's your first cut line. Measure another 1/4 inch out, and that'll be your second cut line. And there you go. That should be precisely where you need to cut your slots and slide your plate through. After cutting out that first slot, I used a drill to drill through the top and bottom of that first slot and through that second layer. That gave me a guide to cut the slot in that second layer. Just be sure you're drilling straight through and not at an angle. You want the slot in both layers to be even with each other, otherwise the plates will be at an angle when inserted. Now before we proceed to weld things up, we're going to loosely mount the bumper back onto the car, just tightening the bolts finger tight. Next, we can now fit the brush guard to the car, ensuring that the brackets approximately line up to where they're going to bolt up to the guard. Take a couple of clamps and clamp the guard to the brackets. This should be the bracket's final mounting position. From here, we can now tack the brackets into place. After that, remove the guards and again remove the bumper, and finish welding the brackets both on the front layer and behind on the second layer. With the brackets fully welded in place, mount the steel bumper back onto the car. We're now going to have to figure out where to cut the holes in the plastic bumper shell to slide the brackets through. Finding out where the brackets will go horizontally was pretty easy. Just measure out from the center of the steel bumper to the brackets, and apply that measurement from the center of the plastic bumper. Finding out where the brackets will stick through vertically, on the other hand, was a bit of a struggle for me. There just isn't really a good way to measure that out, so I ended up just guesstimating. Cutting a small hole, test fitting it to see how well it lines up with the brackets, expanding the hole in the desired direction a small bit, and repeating the process until I got both brackets to fit through comfortably with the plastic bumper fitted snugly against the car. Once you got that done, go ahead and reattach all the screws to secure the bumper in place, as we won't be removing it anymore, as well as reattaching the grille. With the bumper securely mounted in place, we now have to trim the brackets to allow the brush guard to sit snugly against the front of the car. I ended up having to trim about 2 inches off of mine to give me about 3.5 inches sticking out beyond the bumper, but keep in mind that it may be different for you depending on what brush guard you use. Alright, now for the final fitment. Slap that brush guard onto the brackets and adjust it to the exact position that you want it to sit against the front of the car. Then get some clamps and clamp it to the brackets. Now you may be thinking, alright, time to drill some holes and bolt this sucker down. But wait, stop right there. Before you go any further, make absolutely sure that the position of your brush guard won't interfere with the opening and closing of the hood. Alright, are we all good? The hood doesn't hit anything? Alright, good. Now take a 3/8 inch drill bit and drill some holes straight through both the bracket and the brush guard. At least 2 on each side, but preferably 3 if you have the room. And then bolt that sucker down. Alrighty, and there we have it. A brush guard made for a full-size Jeep, modified and mounted on a compact car. For bonus points, drill a few more holes in the crossmember and mount some rally lights. Thanks for watching. Really do hope this helps you out. And if it did, and you want to see more, well, you know what to do. Take care, y'all, and I'll see you on the next project.